If I had to recommend a car that should be in the garage of every family, it should definitely be something that would fit an entire family. But it can't be a van because it has to be something that you could drive on a daily basis easily. So could it be an SUV or a crossover? Well, those things will fit the bill, but three-row ones aren't exactly cheap. And besides, there's a more affordable option that offers more space and practicality, an MPV. Introducing the Gac Gn6. If you're in the market for a 7-seater, you have quite a few to choose from. From your budget meals that are merely designed to get you from point A to point B, to your more premium options that give you all the bells and whistles, but may not always fit the budget. So it's a good thing that there's a happy middle, an MPV that gives you space, comfort, and features without breaking the bank. And some say that an MPV lacks that cool factor, and I beg to disagree. Because after looking at this, I'd say that the Gn6 looks rather sleek, and despite its tall doors and huge greenhouse, it doesn't scream soccer mom. Starting with the front, you get what they call the flying dynamics design, and I personally like how it's not overstyled. Whoever designed this managed to make it look striking without going overboard with the lines and creases. I also like how everything flows. Nothing seems like an afterthought or feels out of place, because all the lines are just so fluidic. You see how the DRL flows down to the grille? It's a minor touch, but it does wonders for the overall aesthetic. And looks may be subjective, but let's face it, some cars look like they were designed by Homer Simpson. In terms of exterior kit, you get LED DRLs, projector-type halogen headlights, and fog lamps. Along the side, you have strong shoulder lines and curvatures, which was inspired by the motion made by swimming dolphins. And I think it really helps to keep this from looking like a flat wall. The side mirrors are mounted on the doors instead of near the window frame, which will definitely help visibility. However, they aren't power folding. The wheel and tire combo of the Gn6 leans more towards the conservative side with these 16-inch wheels wrapped in 215 60 series tires. Like I mentioned earlier, you get this huge greenhouse, and similar to its bigger cousin, the GS8, the glass extends all the way across the rear to give it a wraparound look and a floating roof design. To further complement the modern look, you get LED tail lamps. What isn't so modern is the fact that this is a manual tailgate. Ugh. Now I'm kidding, it isn't that bad. After opening this, you'll see that the trunk floor is quite deep, which allows you to store 324 liters of cargo with the seats up and up to 1100 liters with the rear seats folded. Now let's see what the rest of the interior is like. But since it's such a hot day, let me start the car up first to cool the interior. Since this is an MPV, I figured why not start with the second row seats? After all, this is what sets it apart from your run-of-the-mill SUVs. Now right off the bat, I can tell you that there's heaps of space. These seats are really comfortable. Now I'm 5'8" with my shoes on, and as you can see, there's inches to spare in terms of legroom and headroom. The funny thing is that there's this hump beneath the front seat, and I think that's supposed to serve as a footrest, but it actually prevents you from stretching out. It's great to see individual air vents for each of the passengers, but I wish that the switches for the climate controls were placed here, because they're placed over there and it could be a little hard to reach, especially for someone with excess baggage. However, there is a lot of adjustability here. You can move these seats forwards and backwards, and they recline quite a fair bit. And I have to say that these headrests are the softest in the segment, and I can totally sleep here right now, but I have a review to do. Okay, sorry guys, I know that wasn't the most glamorous thing to watch, but I just wanted to showcase the Gn6's ultra-wide 7.5-inch corridor, which makes getting in and out of the third row a cinch. And unlike most third row seats, this is designed to seat 3 people instead of 2. So despite having captain seats, this is still a 7-seater. And I must say that it's quite spacious in here. It definitely does not feel like a penalty box. And they managed to optimize space by padding the hump made by the wheel wells. Now, it could use a bit more knee room, but it can still accommodate 3 people here without making them feel like sardines. But if I had to sit here with two others, I choose to sit right here in the middle so I can still stretch out. Moving on to the business end, you can kind of tell that this is somewhat a watered down version of the Gn6 compared to what you'll see in other markets. But to say that you don't get a lot of toys would also be far from the truth. It's just that in other markets, you get this big screen here that merges the infotainment with the instrument cluster. And here it's separate, which isn't a big deal. But you also get a regular sunroof as opposed to a panoramic one. But I'm not complaining because this is still a very pleasant place to be. There are hard plastics, but all touch points are extremely soft. Now at first I thought the steering wheel was leather because of these cuts here, but it's actually urethane. But still it isn't too bad to the touch. Now as far as ergonomics is concerned, I wish I could say that it was easy to figure out where everything is, but sometimes you'll mistake this power button for the infotainment system for the car's start button. And it takes a while to find or locate the hazard lights, which is positioned right here next to the e-brake. And only the driver gets physical buttons for the audio system. If the passengers want to operate it, they're going to have to use the touchscreen, and even that is a little hard to reach. The infotainment comes standard with Apple CarPlay but no Android Auto. It also has a backup camera with active guidelines and allows you to change various car settings, including how heavy you want the steering to be. The audio system isn't branded, but it sounds decent enough, and I'm glad they placed the tweeters here, because if they had placed it on the A-pillars with this glass over here, that'll make for some really bad reflections. In terms of storage and utility, you won't be left wanting, because these two armrests are built into the seats, which allows for more storage here in the center console. You get storage here and beneath the gear selector. There's also a power outlet and two more USB ports. So overall, I really like this interior. It doesn't feel cluttered, and it feels so inviting and cozy, which is a trait all MPVs should possess, but sadly not all of them do. And that alone already gives this an edge over its competition. But let's see what else this has in store for us once we get it out on the road. What surprises me the most about this is how it doesn't feel big to drive. And that alone already takes a lot of the stress and fatigue out of driving. To put things into perspective, this sits in between the Toyota Innova and Geely Okavango, meaning it's longer and wider than the Toyota Innova, but shorter and narrower than the Okavango, and it's lower than both vehicles. So it's definitely not small, and the spacious cabin is proof of that, but it definitely feels a lot easier to drive. And I would attribute that to the great visibility and the fact that the dashboard and the beltline sits rather low. Plus, the steering is very responsive, which does a whole lot to make the car feel a lot smaller than it actually is. Now, ride comfort is also surprisingly good, and I say surprisingly because this has a twist beam suspension at the back. And usually cars with a twist beam or a torsion beam suspension means that the impacts are a bit harsher when it comes to road imperfections. But this does a phenomenal job in absorbing or soaking up all the bumps and uneven roads. NVH suppression is also really good. And this has what GAC calls their 360-degree quiet car technology. Now, I have no idea how that works, but it works. In fact, the only noise you'll hear is the sound of the engine, and that's only when you max it out. Speaking of engine, under the hood you get a 1.5-liter turbocharged gasoline engine which produces 170 horsepower and 265 Newton meters of torque. Now, peak torque comes in as early as 1,700 RPM, so this is very responsive. But the power delivery isn't brutal. It's silky smooth and refined, which is how it should be with an MPV. This also has a 6-speed automatic transmission, which is a personal preference because you don't have to deal with any of that droning or jerkiness that comes with other transmission types. So when you pit this against its competition, I would have to say that this provides the best riding and driving experience because you don't have to deal with any of the harshness that comes with a body-on-frame MPV or the jerkiness of a DCT. And as far as steering response is concerned, this is the best of the bunch. The GAC Gn6 only comes with one variant and can be yours for 1,480,000 pesos. And I know what you're thinking. This isn't exactly the cheapest, nor is it the best equipped. But like I always say, sometimes you have to look beyond the brochures and spec sheets to really appreciate something. Like in the case of the Gn6, you can't just read about its cozy interior or pleasant drive. You actually have to experience it firsthand.